Washington Democrats finally introduced the new Millionaire's tax, Seattleites' dumb questions about Tacoma, and cut to the chase where we ask contributor Chase Hutchinson about the region's latest arts news. But first, Chase, critic and journalist at the Seattle Times, contributor to KOW, I've been seeing a bunch of fun little free libraries around town that are full of things that are not books. What do you wish were free in your neighborhood?
Physical media, some movies. Let's get those out there. I know that's going to be the most cliche answer I could have given, but I'm telling you, when I was at Sundance, they had old VHS tapes of the classic movies that were there, like Blair Witch Project. I don't know if they were real, but part of me was like, what if I had a VHS player? What if as a treat I got one?
I need to get one because I've got a box full of VHS tapes that I just inherited from my parents, and I need to be able to watch Now and Then and Titanic on VHS. What about you, creative producer Liam Billingham? What do you want to see for free?
Well, first of all, I just want you all to know that there's a little free library in front of my house, and there is a copy of the 2011 romantic comedy Something Borrowed, starring Kate Hudson and John Krasinski, that has just been in there for months.
You better snag it.
I think I'm going to donate it to Scarecrow if they need another copy of it. What else should be free in your neighborhood? I think food should be free. I don't think people should be paying for food. Sorry if that's controversial, but I think food should be free.
People should be able to eat. I saw a little free pantry in Greenwood, and I think there are several different little free pantries across the city. So if you actually are in need of free food or want to contribute to that stash of free food, I think there is a way to do that. Speaking of being able to afford living in our very expensive city and state, Democrats have finally introduced a millionaire's tax, SB 6346, this week. So Governor Ferguson first announced that would be a possibility this legislative session at the end of last year. And now we finally have gotten to see all of the details of that. So 26 of the 30 Democratic state senators co-sponsored this bill, suggesting that there's some pretty strong support for it on the Dem side here. And it applies to Washingtonians with an adjusted gross income of over $1 million. And it would start in 2028. It would be a 9.9% tax on incomes over $1 million. So for those who don't remember how tax brackets work, say you make $1.2 million, it would not be taxing that entire amount. It would be the 9.9% on that $200K above the $1 million cutoff. So the bill's sponsors estimate that it's going to raise $3 billion for the state. 5% of that is designated for county public defense funds, and the remainder of it would go into a general fund, which funds stuff like higher education, K through 12 education, healthcare, human services, and tax relief. Basically all the stuff that, keeps our state going. The other interesting thing is that while Ferguson talked about the possibility of this bill being introduced, he immediately came out after the bill was introduced saying that the bill doesn't go far enough in providing tax relief. So in a statement that I saw on Facebook, of all places, he said, "I appreciate the hard work that went into drafting this initial proposal. It's a good start, but I cannot support it in this form. I have repeatedly insisted that a significant percentage of the revenue generated by the millionaire's tax must go back into the pockets of Washingtonians to make life more affordable, and this proposal does not come close to doing that." All right, so now that you've heard a bit about this, what open questions do you have?
I would love to know some of the reporting of what's happening behind closed doors, because, and this is going to be not a cynical take on my perspective, but like, there's conversations that happen in the public eye and conversations that happen in the private kind of behind closed doors negotiations. And this feels like the type of thing of, we are close to something behind private kind of conversation, and most of it's gesturing towards we're going to get there. But if anything, it's that the governor can say, I took these extra steps. I wanted to like push on these specific things. I don't think anyone's actually going to probably be opposed. It doesn't seem like anyone thinks this is actually going to be a huge schism based on the reporting in KUOW. I read that was very good. There's obviously Republican opposition, but that won't actually hold this up. That's the thing I'm always curious about is, and it might be something we only learn about like a year from now, of like what were the conversations actually like behind closed doors that were motivating some of these specific statements and actions.
Yeah, I think there's like an interesting sort of articleably or oral history to be written about sort of Ferguson's evolving opinion on this and what led to it, because like, you know, he's coming out strong and with, you know, sort of like with arms swinging on this issue. And like, you know, my sort of reaction earlier was like, oh, that doesn't seem like a lot. But then when you contextualize $3 billion, it's like that's amazing amount of money that could really improve people's lives here. So I really would be curious, like, you know, and this feels similarly to what Chase said, something that would be down the road, to hear how he's evolved into this position.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of last year, Ferguson was pretty firm that it was going to be an austerity budget and that we weren't going to introduce any new taxes, and $3 billion would be $3 billion that the state didn't have before. Critics have raised concerns that this could drive away high earners from our region. Do we really think millionaires are going to go elsewhere?
I haven't seen a lot of evidence to support that. I feel like it's oftentimes the thing that people raise concerns about, but I just haven't, and someone I'm sure will correct me and find some sort of specifics, but on a broad scale, I haven't, in all the things I've been reading about this, because I'm also curious, I haven't seen that to be the case, just because it is a big undertaking to move elsewhere. And who knows, maybe this could be something where suddenly the floodgates open, but historically I don't think this is a thing that we've seen much of a trend with.
So Chase, you're going to stay. You're saying you're not
Yes.
you're not going to leave.
I'm not taking my billions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's like a logistical challenge to it, and like this is always the constant refrain is like, oh, it's going to ruin the city. It's going to, you know, there's not going to be any money, and like I just think that like that's, what's the expression? It's easier said than done, kind of feels like the mentality or the way to think about it. And I think also that like this kind of progressive thinking on taxes, like you kind of have to take those risks a little bit and those first steps, because it's kind of like Obamacare, and that you need to normalize some aspect of this for people to then want it. Because I guarantee you that like if and when this goes through, it's going to become incredibly popular among voters, and that's going to drive politicians to continue to support it because they want to stay in office.
I do feel like this millionaire's tax is a slightly more palatable version of a bill that was introduced earlier in the legislative session, also trying to raise taxes. So I believe this was spearheaded by Representative Sean Scott and other Dems in the House. They introduced HB 2100, which was modeled on Seattle's Jumpstart tax. So this is a little bit different than, you know, taxing individuals making over $1 million. This would be a 5% payroll tax on medium and large companies for the portion of their employee payroll that exceed $125,000 annually per worker. So essentially, if you have employees that are making over $125,000, you're paying an extra 5% payroll tax on anything that you're paying them over that 125K. And this would apply to companies that employ more than 20 people. So, you know, mid-sized, smallish, mid-sized companies, and that have over $5 million in gross receipts or sales. I mean, similarly, I think it does try and raise funds through lobbying taxes on folks who are, you know, already doing okay. And trying to make sure that we're not relying on sales taxes and levies where that disproportionately affects people who are making a small amount of money. But we'll see where that goes. It seems like currently it's still in committee. And while there are many Dems that have supported it and, you know, co-sponsored it, it seems like this new millionaire's tax is maybe taking center stage right now politically. However, we can have more than one thing at once.
Yeah, I feel like that one weirdly is like the trickier one, because it's putting this pressure on businesses that, you know, in a time when it's tricky to keep a business going in this, you know, and even a small to medium sized business. So I feel like, and look, I'm not by any means an expert on these. It feels like of the two that you've described, Jane, like that feels like the riskier proposition, because when people hear payroll tax, they think about what that's going to do to the bottom line of a company, and also companies that you want to keep alive.
Yeah, there are business organizations and chamber of commerces in local towns nearby that have come out against this, saying that some Seattleites don't like how our jumpstart taxes worked out, so they don't want to see that statewide.
Mm.
Didn't know if either of you had any other thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think that the challenge is, like, I think the idea of, again, the billionaire tax is like popular, or the millionaire tax, it's very popular, and it makes sense, and there's been a call to this for a long time, and it's grown in terms of support. But I think the tax on a business or the payroll of a business is like a totally different ball game, because I think it's very easy to differentiate between, say, someone like a local, very wealthy person who lives in the state being taxed on their income versus like, oh, we're going to put the onus on a small business at a time when the economy, feels so kind of fragile.
I would guess most of us plebes feel like $1 million is quite a bit more than what we are likely to ever see. And I think the bill sponsors say that would affect about 0.5% of Washingtonians. So
right.
And, taxing 0.5% of Washingtonians raising $3 billion is quite remarkable.
Totally.
Well, we've still got a few weeks left in the legislative session. I'm sure that we will see different amendments made to these various bills and see if they move through committee. Let's take a break, and when we come back, Chase, I want to hear about your thoughts on Tacoma. We have questions for you from these two somewhat ignorant Seattleites about life in Tacoma. So what our listeners may or may not already know is that Chase Hutchinson is down in Tacoma and comes up to Seattle quite often. I have spent some time in Tacoma. I feel like more of my friends have moved there recently. So the weight of some of my social circle has descended south. And I realize I have a bunch of questions about Tacoma that I have never been brave enough to ask an actual Tacoma person. So actually that leads me to my first one, which is, Chase, what do you call someone who lives in Tacoma?
Jeez. A Tacoma resident?
Come on, dude.
A Tacoman?
A Tacoma?
What are you running for election?
I would say the coolest people in Washington State. That's what you call them. No, I think Tacoman is probably right. It has a better ring to it than Seattleite. Apologies, which sounds like an icicle. I'm throwing in the hot takes now.
Are those shots fired? I don't know. I can't tell.
You were saying I was running
Sorry,
for office.
I can't hear you all the way down in Tacoma.
No, I think Tacoman is definitely the one that I've heard. But I don't know. There's different experiences of Tacoma, too, I think is important to say. Like, just like in Seattle, there's different neighborhoods. There's entirely different experiences. And so broad level Tacoman is probably something that is fine. But you would want to talk to people about their specific experiences. Because I don't know, I went to school here, and my experience in school here versus then living here full time as an actual adult with a job is different. People who've grown up here, people who've lived in the Hilltop neighborhood, those are all important histories and contexts that I imagine we'll get into a little bit here. But I would say every person is going to have their own Tacoma story. It's a pretty vibrant, diverse place with a lot of exciting things going on, but also its own complicated histories as well.
My main question, I've thought about moving to Tacoma many times, especially when the mansion that was in 10 Things I Hate About You was for sale. I was talking to several writer friends about, what if we just all went in and bought this house and then lived in Tacoma and lived happily ever after? I feel like there is this belief about Tacoma among Seattleites that it's cheaper. Is that true? What is the cost of living comparison
I think it is writ large cheaper, but obviously there have been increases that are happening because I think, and this is not me taking a shot at you, Jane, but people who kind of treat Tacoma as like a suburb of Seattle sort of is a thing I've heard, where then once you start coming down here, prices oftentimes will go up.
Mm.
It's one of those things where there's a little bit of a tension at play. In addition to Seattle having stolen valor in stealing 10 Things I Hate About You, which is a 10 Things I Hate, which is definitely a Tacoma movie more than it's a Seattle movie, the cities are intertwined. And so I would say that it is still probably more affordable based on my own experience. I live in Tacoma. I commute up to Seattle pretty frequently for work related things. But looking at some of the prices in Seattle, it just is like a whole different other world. But whether that if people move to Tacoma in large numbers, that might start to have an impact on these things. And as we get more public transit, that might have an impact on some of these things. I know they're trying to connect up all the way to Seattle, which has been a thing for several years. So the answer is yes, but it's complicated.
What's a night out in Tacoma look like for you, Chase? What do you do for fun?
Well, so I'll go to the Grand Cinema. Shocking.
Wow, breaking. Chase goes to movies.
I know. And that's a lovely place to go. But I would say there are also still good music venues. Even as recently I did report on Tacoma Arts Live. Unfortunately, we'll be closing down later this year. There still is good stuff going on. There are shows to go see. There are along 6th Street, oftentimes markets and different, like my favorite thing that Tacoma would do was Porch Fest. I don't know if anyone is aware of this.
I've heard of it, but I've never been.
I've heard of it in other places, but not necessarily like Porch Fests in other towns and cities, but not actually. This is the first time hearing of it in Washington.
It's basically a free walkable music festival that takes place on porches. And it was always just this lovely community thing that would happen. And it's something I've been thinking about more. Artists oftentimes live in Tacoma more so than they do in Seattle. That if you want to be a working artist, sometimes Tacoma is the place that you're at more so than elsewhere. I'm not trying to say there aren't artists in Seattle, but if you're trying to find your footing, there are oftentimes a lot of people doing their work here and like exploring their art here. And so I think that gives it a vibrancy to where everyone that just steps out on their porch and jams out, and all the dads get to have their dad rock, and it's great.
We need more. Important. We need more representation in that area, so it's good. It's good to hear. Yeah, I love that for us.
What do you think Tacoma does better than Seattle, Chase?
Oh man, you're really setting me up.
Speak on it, Chase.
What does Tacoma do better than Seattle? I think there's oftentimes events in parks that I've noticed more. There's Wright Park that oftentimes will just do big, fun events like that. It feels like very frequently. I'm not trying to say there aren't a lot of those in Seattle, but I feel like I see them in Tacoma just all the time, especially during the summer, and that it's pretty accessible and it's very walkable and everyone can kind of take part. Obviously, definitely still challenges, but that's the thing that jumps out into mind. It might be that I just haven't seen them in Seattle because on the weekends I'm walking around Tacoma more than I am Seattle. But I do genuinely think, oh wow, there's always kind of, especially during the nice warm months, something going on outside in Tacoma. Maybe it's that we're more outdoorsy because we're able to go to things a little bit easier. Seattle is maybe a little bit farther removed from some of these things. Yeah.
You all are closer to Rainier.
We are closer to Rainier. We can see it a lot. Like when
Can I ask the upside down of that question? What does Seattle do better than Tacoma? Just to keep you on the hot seat.
I mean, some of it's going to be that, even as I said a minute ago, that there are like a lot of shows and like vibrant cultural scenes. Seattle does get some of the bigger like touring artists. Mm-hmm. Not always. There have been times where people will be at the Tacoma Dome or other smaller venues within the city, but Seattle is still the place where if there's a big person making a stop, that's probably where they're going to go.
All right, last question for you about Tacoma, Chase. What do Seattleites get wrong about Tacoma that makes you mad or that you wish that they knew?
Great question. Good job, Jane.
These are some deep questions. And the thing I'll say is that every person is probably going to have their own different answer to them. But the thing
what's yours?
But the thing I would say is that, kind of tying back to what I said before, that Tacoma is not just some sort of like suburb for Seattle. It has its own history and culture and music, and is not just sort of like living in the shadow of this place. There is so much to discover here that is distinct from, and maybe a little bit, in my perspective, more pure than like what Seattle is in some respects. That the Seattle of now is so much about tech and tech workers that I would say Tacoma still has a little bit more of that cultural kind of fabric to it. It's obviously struggling, all arts and culture organizations are, but I would say there's still a lot of exciting stuff going on in Tacoma that is like not just a barnacle off of Seattle, but its own vibrant community.
Mm. But we just to be clear, 10 Things I Hate About You is a Seattle movie.
No, it is not.
No, it's a Seattle. I'm sorry, it is. It is objectively a Seattle movie.
They say it is, but they shoot it at Lincoln High School, which I still remember. There was the 10 Things I Hate About You summer screening where you were able to watch Heath Ledger on the screen singing his song and hear it coming through the speakers of there. It was one of the coolest things in the world.
And the mansion was in Tacoma.
Yeah, but okay, whatever. It's a Seattle movie. Sorry.
I will say, as a Seattleite, I defect to you on that, Chase. That is a Tacoma movie. Sorry, 2 against 1, Liam. You're wrong.
I lost. Damn it, I lost. All right, well, fine.
End of segment. We're going to cut to an ad, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the local art scene. This is our weekly segment that we are calling Cut to the Chase, where...
Do we need theme music? Sorry, do we need like a little ditty here for this?
I think we should come up with something. Maybe you should sing it. Yeah, there we go. That's the new theme music. All right, we're just going to crop that, and we're going to play it every week, and all of our listeners are going to love that.
They're going to love I'm going to get a record recording deal, writing ditties for... Oh, I can't say ditties anymore. Anyway, jingles.
This is Cut to the Chase, where Chase is going to give us the latest arts news. So I know that TASVIR has come back around, the South Asian Film Festival, and it's going to be taking place in what is now the TASVIR Film Center, formerly known as the old Arc Lodge in Columbia City. Chase, have you gotten a preview of that, or is there something going on with this film festival that you want to highlight?
Well, the thing I would say is that the film festival has been around, that they've been a continual presence, but it was last year in March that I reported on them taking over this beloved theater that was falling on hard times. I've since talked with people where it's complicated feelings about having a theater that wasn't able to survive on its own, that's still being kind of a tough, sad thing that you're losing out on. But what's happened now is they're reopening, that they're going to be showing films such as Cactus Pears, All That's Left of You, 2 kind of bigger festival films that I would recommend. The focus basically is still being on world and South Asian cinema, but they're also going to do sort of retrospective screenings as well. I still haven't gotten a full picture of what that's going to look like because they're only just opening now, but I'm intrigued. I think this is an interesting development for this theater that used to be something different and now has its own kind of new emphasis going forward that I think could be a good thing. More theaters in the city or more theaters kind of coming back and having a second life is always going to be a good thing.
Yeah, I've been wondering what happened to that building. I was just down there a couple weeks ago and saw the old Arc Lodge, and the sign outside just said "Be Good," which I really loved. So I'm really glad to hear this news, and it answers this lingering question that I'd had walking around Columbia City.
No, and I think there have been things I have heard that are complicated in terms of this like next period of growth. So if anyone ever has worked there or has anything they would like to share, I would love to hear it. But for now, it certainly seems like after what has almost been a year since the first news of them acquiring the theater, we're now finally seeing what the next stage of it could be like.
What kind of complications are we talking here?
I had heard there were some layoffs. that post the acquisition of the theater, there were some layoffs. And that's a tough thing. And obviously lots of arts organizations are struggling through that. But as we'll get to a little bit later, not to tease too much of setting myself up, you always hope that post layoffs like that, you could hire people back or you could bounce back, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really exciting to me about this, and this is sort of like a kind of a utopian view, is that like a very sort of focused theater that's focusing on like world cinema or South Asian cinema, like has an opportunity to really cut through and make that kind of representation a part of, like, for lack of a better word, mainstream film going, as we're getting more movies from around the world. You know, I think like particularly South Asian film is like very well represented in the cinephilic world, but it has a little less like pull over mainstream audiences. Like, and so I think the more representation you can get of that stuff, and I think the idea is always that film is very specific and universal at the same time, that like this kind of focus is really good for movie going in general, especially in a year when you have a movie like The Secret Agent from Brazil that's getting a lot of mainstream attention. Jafar Panahi's what's the name of the film?
It was just
Chase?
an accident.
It was just an accident, that are really crossing over. Like, these kinds of centers can play a role in helping that crossover happen over time. And so it's really important, I think, to invest in these kinds of places, because they offer a way in for filmmakers who are traditionally underrepresented in this area.
Absolutely. I do also wonder just whose stories get told and prioritized. And I guess I'll just have to go see for myself and see what films they bring in and to make my own assessment of that. Chase, I understand you have some more news for us.
Yes. So this is then shifting towards the Northwest Film Forum, to where a couple years ago, it was unfortunate, they had pretty substantial layoffs where they laid off almost half of the staff. And that was tough. That's a big hit. They said they did that because they needed to not go off a financial cliff and have things really start to get bad. But now we are at a point where the interim executive director, as of this week and some exclusive reporting I've done, is going to be the full-time executive director. It's Jill Busby, who's been there for quite a while now, and I spoke with her about some of her plans. She intends to rehire back a couple people and begin to grow, but grow sustainably, which I know can oftentimes be like, well, that sounds like nonprofit PR speak, but it's about how do you as an arts organization continue to meet people to fulfill your kind of big level mission, but also still be here in 5 years, in 10 years, because it's tough out there for arts organizations.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be bringing this good-ish news with obviously the caveats. It was good to hear that there is now hopefully some forward momentum is what I'm hearing. And especially where some of the context of the reporting of the last year, where SIF is not going to be doing some of their film classes. The new executive director of the Northwest Film Forum told me they're going to be trying to expand and reach people. Again, with the caveat that you need to like make sure you can support that through grants, through other sort of resources. But that's kind of where I'm excited, because the Northwest Film Forum shows movies that oftentimes wouldn't play in the city at all if they weren't there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what do you see as their niche as opposed to SIF or other independent theaters in town?
Well, and I don't think this will make it into the piece I had done, but they did show the SpongeBob movie, or one of the SpongeBob movies. So, you know,
hell yeah, dude.
You gotta have your high and your low. But something I would shout out this week is The Mysterious Gaze of the Flamingo, which was a movie that was Chili's Oscar submission. It didn't get it because it was a really stacked year, but it had made a splash on the festival circuit. It's quite interesting. It's a very strikingly shot sort of period drama with like a lot of other things going on that I won't give away. But that's something where it could play at other theaters, but currently it's not. It's that the Northwest Film Forum without them is not going to be seen. They're also opening Resurrection, which was at SIF, but again, more theaters showing things in a place that might be more accessible to folks, or just like more opportunities to see things. That's what's always kind of exciting. They also do the local sightings film festival, which really is like one of the most like hyper local film festivals where it's not people pretending Washington or the Pacific Northwest is where they're shooting when they're shooting somewhere else, but actually like local filmmakers. And that matters. Like finding kind of those avenues for people to see your work, that can be a very valuable thing. It can create kind of not just a theater, but like a cultural hub where people begin to share in these works of art that maybe wouldn't be able to be seen anywhere else.
You know, I think what's really interesting about what you're saying is that, like, I think now more than ever, I think curatorial voices are really, really important, like, within the context of all of this, right? Like, there's so much stuff being made, and, you know, it may not seem like a lot, but Northwest Film Forum choosing to program the Chilean film that you just described, like, it's giving people the chance to see something they might not see. You know, we covered the Pacific Northwestern series about a month ago, and I went to one of those screenings, and it was the second one I'd been to that was sold out. And I think people are looking for guidance about what to watch that isn't an algorithm serving them the first movie they see on Netflix. I think there's like an inherent... This goes along with the conversations we've been having about like physical media and people buying records. Like we're re-entering a stage of like, we want an authoritative or curatorial voice to tell us what to spend our time with. And, you know, something like Northwest Film Forum expanding its programming or SIF taking a chance on these kinds of these older films, like it's breaking through, and it's a really exciting moment for arts. You just kind of have to push aside the like algorithmic takeover that is happening in our homes.
There's a really special feeling that comes from the discovery of a film you didn't know existed that you are really excited to see. I remember that a few years ago, Northwest Film Forum did a screening of a documentary called We Believe in Dinosaurs, which was about the life-size Noah's Ark replica that was built in my home state of Kentucky. I have always wanted to report on that and have just never gotten my life together to really dig into it. And I was so pleased to learn that other people had not only done that, but already had a film out about it. And I got to go and enjoy it. And I have never seen that appear elsewhere. And so it felt very special to me I felt like I had struck gold.
Totally.
And the other thing I was going to say, speaking of documentaries, Northwest Film Forum is also playing this documentary called Black News Terms and Conditions from Seattle filmmaker Khalil Joseph that I would really recommend because it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And it did briefly play at SIF Film Center through like a pop-up screening from the Grand Illusion.
Yeah.
This is a more full run. Or at least I've seen a couple more days. And so it kind of is like everyone can begin to show these films collectively. It's another chance to see something. And that opens the 21st and the 22nd with 2 showings each day. And so I don't know, maybe that could be your new We Believe in Dinosaurs, Jane.
I'll have to go check it out. Well, Chase, thank you so much for joining us and for, by the way, bringing up SpongeBob for the second time on our show.
What? When did I bring it up before?
You showed us that you had some kind of SpongeBob coffee.
Yes. That didn't make the cut.
You know, if you're not on YouTube, go on there because Chase is actually wearing a SpongeBob t-shirt. He's got a SpongeBob poster.
It's SpongeBob all the time here in Tacoma.
It should be.
Yeah.
The best.
Well, thanks for bringing us your SpongeBob, Chase.
Always happy to.
And Liam, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Until next time, see ya, Seattle.